Kia ora race fans, and welcome to our first episode of the NZIGP Legends Lounge. So basically the format's pretty simple. As you can see, it's an electronic lounge. We're going to be going around the world and talking to some of the motorsport legends that have come out of New Zealand and asking them questions and seeing how they are and what's going on in their world. So without further ado, let me just introduce who we've got tonight. So I've got to switch everything at the same time, so it's a little bit juggling many hands at the same time. So first up to introduce, we have in a hot seat doing the interviewing, we've got Micheal Clark, who's a well-known writer who's wrote this lovely book here, among many others, as well as an MC and and pretty much one of the best historians, I think, in motorsport in New Zealand. I see him shaking his head. So how are you? Where are you first, and how are you this evening?
Right, I'm in Drury, south of Auckland, not far from the Pukekohe racetrack actually, and this is where I've pretty much been for the last 2 weeks since lockdown came in.
And then, what are you doing during this lockdown time?
Well, I've been working. I'm my normal work is I'm a property valuer, so I've been doing that. But I also decided, what the heck, I'll write a book. So I'm already 29,000 odd words into a book called New Zealand Motor Racing's Fascinating Facts. And the reason I'm so far into it is because I've been writing the book in a funny kind of way for a long time. It's a collection of a lot of columns that I've written over the last 18 years, and probably David Oxton and Dick Bennetts will feature in it amongst lots of other people. So, you know, it's a collection of lots of funny stories, interesting, fascinating, subjective words. But if it's interesting to me, well, then it passes the test as far as I'm concerned.
Great. Well, I need to introduce our other guests, and so our first guest, who went to the UK in the 1970s with our other guest, and it's David Oxton, who's been one of the top drivers in New Zealand right through national Formula Ford, Formula 5000, Formula Pacific, and is one of only two people who have actually taken the Gold Star Championship 5 times. After hanging up his helmet, David obviously went into television commentating as well, so he's pretty used to this type of format. Good evening, David. How are you?
Hello, Adam. I'm good, and doing my best to follow Jacinda's instructions about hunkering down or whatever it is, not going to the pub, not driving to work like others I know, and all those sort of things, being a good guy.
And whereabouts are you?
Just back at home in Herne Bay is where we hide down by the water, and it's pretty tempting to go for a swim, but I guess that's banned too now. But anyway, the weather's not going to be too good for the Easter, so I'll just toe the line, read some old comics, and maybe get some photos into order from my history files.
Great. So I should introduce our third guest, who is in the UK and a good friend of David's. In fact, he stayed in the UK after David came back to New Zealand. He's had success in many categories in motor racing. He's worked with some of the world's top drivers, Ayrton Senna, Niki Lauda, Nigel Mansell, to name a few. He's the team principal of Surrey Racing, who have won the last 2 British touring car, both championships and teams. 2020 sees him go with a 3-car team, BMW Assault on the touring cars again, with driver Colin Turkington, who's looking for his 5th crown. Good morning to you over there, Mr. Dick Bennetts.
Evening, Adam and David and Michael. Yeah, it's good to be there. Good to be here. Sorry. Great idea this, and it's just gone 9 o'clock in the morning here, so I'm busy having a coffee. No wine at the moment.
So obviously the team's in lockdown there. Yeah?
Yes, yeah. I've been in the office a little bit, but there's only 2 of us. The whole workshop is shut down as of the day after our media day at Silverstone. So, yeah, tough going, but as David said, we're towing the line as well, because I think it's crucial that everyone does that. And, yeah, there's always fine things to do at home. Getting roped into a bit of gardening, so I'm finding that a bit hard.
So that media day went pretty well for you?
Yes, yeah. No, it's a good day. Of course, you never know what the others are doing, but the top teams, I don't think we show our full hand properly. So we were quite happy to be, I think, 5th and 7th. So.
All right, so we're going to do what we're going to do now is we're going to do a couple of real quick questions around the room. Michael, you might as well jump in on this as well. So we'll go Michael, David, and then Dick. And first up, is it Vegemite or Marmite?
Very simple, Vegemite.
David?
Neither. They're both poison.
I used to be Marmite, but now I'm a Vegemite man.
All right, so favourite song?
The Beatles, A Day in the Life.
Eagles, Hotel California, or anything Eagles.
Yeah, Eagles like David, but also more currently now is Coldplay, Chris Martin. We love him. He's fantastic. Saw him live at Wembley. Absolutely storming.
And next one up is 3 words to describe your motorsport career.
Well, I haven't had one, so I'll pass it on to David straight away.
Has been great so far.
3 words. Absolutely fantastic journey.
Great. Best advice you've been given?
Best advice I've been given is don't worry about what other people think about you.
Mine's pretty simple. Never give up.
Yeah, very true. It's we can always what's the words? Never say never. You can always achieve things if you put your mind and heart into it.
And Dick said that because at the last lap of the last race of last year's BTCC Championship, he looked at me and said, well, this season's gone. And I said, Dick, it's never over till it's over. And that's about the point his opposition hit the wall and Colin Turkington came through and won the championship. And Dick was nearly in tears. I think he might have been, actually. What'd you make?
Yeah, it was... that was one case where we thought it was over, but you keep the belief in, and we got there in the end. And there were a few tears, but later on that night there were a few beers.
Anyway, well, so without further mucking around from me, I'm going to hand it over to Michael now, and Michael's going to take us through a bit bigger interview, I guess, with you guys. And at this end, I've got a whole bunch of photos that we're going to bring up at the same time as we tell the story. So I'm going to go back into the studio here and just start working all the controls as you can see here. And I'm going to hand it over to you guys, to Michael, to get into the main part of it. So over to you, Michael.
Well, thank you, Adam, and thank you for dressing up for the occasion. You look great. It occurred to me, David and Dick, the other day when news came through that Eric Mallard had passed away. The doyen of not just New Zealand motor racing, but particularly of the Auckland Car Club. And it was the Auckland Car Club that the two of you met. Have I got that right? Presumably the night you met, if it was at the Auckland Car Club, Eric would have been there.
Yes. I think Dave would have probably remember as Eric was upstairs cooking us probably steak and chips or something like that, or hamburger and chips. And David and everyone else, we were down at the bar.
That's right, Dick. The Mallard family, in fact, Audrey, Eric's dear wife, and his kids, Janice and Judith, were always out there looking after the members. And on any given Thursday, we'd be down there, apart from having a good drink, with the what a neat period, Dick. We had Jimmy Richards, we had the famous and legendary Reg Cook, the rally guys, the gravel ratchers as we call them, Paul Adams and Mike Marshall, just to name a couple. So we really had a busy night, always on a Thursday, and something we all looked forward to, and told a few lies and watched a few movies. And had a few Karubas maybe, and certainly that Eric Mallow Hamburg was a highlight.
David, you were just saying to
Remember
me
it
the
well,
other
it
day, in
was,
fact, that sorry, Dick, you go.
Sorry, Mike. I remember it was Dennis Marwood when I worked at Performance Developments. He took me in there the first time to introduce me because I'd come up from Dunedin. I didn't know anyone at all. I was boarding with a family out in Papakura, and it was I moved to Auckland because I wanted to continue a career in motorsport, and it was Dennis that introduced me to David at the Auckland Car Club. And then from that day, I think 1969 or 70, we're still very close friends.
And Dick, we got on well straight away because we both like cars and blondes.
Well, I wasn't going to go down that road, but as you've started, yes, I can't disagree.
And that's an important thing. You were at the Auckland Car Club together because, Dick, you'd come up and answered an ad that Ray Stone and Dennis Marwood had placed, for a keen young man.
Yes, that's right. That was from Alan Vick in his magazine, and I was the Otago Sports Car Club, and similar scenario to the Auckland Car Club, but we didn't have someone like Eric making burgers for us, so it was just Spates and Spates and Spates.
So you went from helping Dennis with the Camaro, I guess. Was that sort of one of your first motor racing jobs when you joined them?
Yes, not only that, there was the iStart Formula 5000 car. We had Joe Wright was the main man there, and we did a lot of, we had Paul Fahey's beautiful Allen Man Escort, FEA Escort, and that's where my passion really came on even stronger. But then I also, the Camaro that Ian Rorison brought in from the States, it had a 5-litre engine, but after year one, we realised we were lagging behind, so I built up a 6-litre engine for the Camaro, and that suddenly put us right on the pace, so fantastic learning.
Dick, is that the photo you sent me of the Camaro that we've got here?
Sorry, is the one? Yes, yeah.
So that's the black and white one as well, yeah? Let me find
That was the one, I think, taken at Bay Park.
this one here, which you can't see because you're not on Facebook. The number 25 Devlo Racing.
Yeah,
Yes.
if it was 25, it was certainly Dennis, that's for sure. Bright orange, radio eye probably on one of the front fenders.
Yeah, that's it on the front. Yeah, radio eye. There's one I've taken in the dusty pits at Bay Park. I don't know if you've got that one there.
Yep, I've got that up on screen now.
So, so Dick, in those days, were you more of an engine guy or a chassis guy, or were you an everything guy?
Early days, it was mainly engines, Michael. That's what I've been doing in Dunedin, and we thought we knew a bit about chassis, but what I know now, perhaps in those days, it was all about horsepower. We didn't worry about suspension or brakes. But I think if I went back now and prepared a Camaro, it would be a lot quicker.
So you were involved with V8s and the FVA engine with Paul Fahey's Escort. So what did you make of going and prepping a 1600cc Kent-powered Formula Ford for your new mate Oxo?
It's just the same challenge, to be honest, because you take a production Formula Ford engine, and then I'll never forget Alan Wardrop, who was the owner of Scholar Engines up in Martlesham Heath in England. And when we came to rebuild it to get ready for the World Cup, I spent 2 weeks rebuilding one 1600cc Formula Ford Kent engine, and he couldn't believe it. And I understood that he couldn't do that as a production company. He'd never make money, but it was quite an interesting project. And when we put it on the dyno, it was his best ever Formula Ford, but it was good for Scholars because it had Scholar on the engine cover, and then David put it on pole position.
I've just got a question here from Bob McMurray. He said, did you ever feel the need to race yourself?
I did try when I was 17, 18, 19 in Dunedin, some hill climbs and grass track, but I decided fairly quickly that I was probably better at engineering than driving.
If Bob bought the New Zealand Classic Car magazine, he'd be able to read part 1 of Lunch with Dick Bennetts, and that matter is covered there. So, Bob, it's all there in black and white. So let's bring David back into the picture here, because Dick's just talked about going to the World Cup for Formula Ford. To get there, it required your mate to win the New Zealand Formula Ford Championship, which turned out to be New Zealand's first Formula Ford Championship. And David, I guess at some point along the line, you might have mentioned to your new friend Dick Bennetts that should you be the champion, how would he like to come along with you?
I don't honestly remember how we went about that. Obviously, I established that Dick was keen to go to Europe, and it was dependent on me having a win. And so that all came together. And so that we had a couple of practice sort of setup sessions in the workshop, and we decided the best way of doing it was going to do about half a dozen or more, maybe a dozen race meetings in England, and we did that. We had a great time, wonderful place to go and race, and went to all the good tracks. And it was well, to me, it was one of the highlights of my life, was going to Brands Hatch for the first time with a little Kiwi team. And we used a car which was actually on loan from another famous old Kiwi. Come on, help me out, Dick. I've gone dozy on it.
Alan Burrows.
Alan Burrows. Sorry, AB. And Alan loaned me his Merlin. We put it together and got this engine off Scholars, which Dick put his magic touches into. And, it probably sort of blew the locals away a little bit of how this old car was up there. But I like to think it was a combination of our joints chemistry, our super duper engine, and just maybe Kiwi ingenuity of getting to grips with what was necessary. It was good. I screwed it in the race course. As you probably all know, I walled it, as they say in the modern language. But, it was pretty good for a couple of days. We got pole for a couple of days, and everyone was pretty happy about that. But I let the tribe down a bit.
Yeah, well, for people that don't know what we're talking about, it was all of the Formula Ford champions from all nations running Formula Ford, and they all assembled at Brands Hatch on the 22nd of October 1972. And in the oldest car in the field, the Kiwi put his on pole position. How did that feel, Dick?
It was fantastic. We had our pre and post meetings at a pub down the bottom of the hill from Brands Hatch. We didn't have any motorhomes or big transporters, so our debriefs and chats were down in the pub. But I'll never forget that it was a great venture. But as David said, prior to the actual World Cup, we were doing these other races around the UK, Mallory Park, Alton Park, Silverstone. And one thing that sticks in my mind, a legend who's sadly no longer with us, we were in the pub we always had a beer after a race to discuss things. And a guy came across to us, quite a large man who drove touring cars, and his name was Jerry Marshall. And he said, I admire you Kiwi guys. Every time after a race, you come in the bar and have a beer. I said, well, we're having a debrief. That's how we do it. He said, I really like you guys. So that was, as David said, our little Kiwi team. We're always having a chat about the race, what was good, what was bad, what we can do next time. But this Jerry Marshall guy, he's absolutely, he's a legend.
Yeah. Great times.
And of these hundreds of books behind me on my bookshelf here, there is the Jerry Marshall biography, which I think is actually called I Was Only There for the Beer.
Right. Very true, I have to admit.
So at the end of that campaign, Dick, you decided that you'd stay in England for a wee bit and then a wee bit longer.
It was supposed to be 18 months, but now I'm still here. It's motorsport that kept me here initially, but I love the country. I love New Zealand. And my dear lady, Terry, we've had lots of discussions. Will we buy an apartment in Wanaka? Because we both love Central Otago. We love the Pinot Noirs. But basically the motorsport in the UK or Europe is fantastic. So it started out working for various teams in Formula 2, and then I got the opportunity to set up our own little team, which kicked us off, and it's been a journey. A few ups and downs, but more ups and downs.
But part of that journey involved a guy called Fred Opert, who became known to New Zealanders in the early 70s. His name appeared on the side of cars that came to New Zealand, and next thing, you're here with him.
Yes, yeah. Fred approached me when I was working for the Works March team. I loved the two bosses there, Robin Hurd, Max Mosley, but I didn't get on with the chief mechanic, and then I realised he was an Aussie, I was a Kiwi, so that was the problem there. But it was, the Fred's opportunity then was to come out. The first opening was to come to New Zealand with Brian Redman with that Chevron BMW against the Formula 5000 cars. So that was an interesting little project. I then went on to help him out with the Formula 2 in Europe running Keke Rosberg.
And that Chevron, of course, stayed in New Zealand, and we bring David back into the story again because, David, that ended up being your first Formula Pacific car.
Yeah, unfortunately, Formula 5000 ran its course in the about sort of 76. Kenny Smith, Graham Lawrence really did a great job in the last couple of years, but the powers that be had decided that it was too expensive or wasn't the future, whatever. And there was a bit of this harmony at the time, I think, because Robbie Lester from Manfield really encouraged Formula Pacific. He wanted to see it go. Formula Atlantic, it was called in the States, but Formula Pacific here. And so when it was authorised, whatever, the changeover period was a bit of a mixture. So the first year we ran Formula Atlantics with the 5000s. And then eventually when we got going properly, well, they were pure Formula Atlantics, pure for Pacific and New Zealand for the same car. But they were a neat little car. When I look back, they probably weren't a 5000, but everyone now is saying that was a neat era because we had the wonderful drivers. And as Dick said, we had Freddie Opert bringing out Keke Rosberg, Bobby Rahal, with Tio Fabi, with Murray Taylor Racing. I mean, the list goes on. Was heaps of Aussies, and there was Dave McMillan, Steve Millen, Ken Smith holding the flag up over here with me. So, it was a pretty neat series. And we had the B29 Chevron first off, a little bit overweight, but it was okay for a couple of years. And then Dick educated me, and I saw the light a bit later on. We got an RT4. But let's go back, and Dick will tell us a little bit about Keke, because some great stories about him down here.
I can't tell all the stories, unfortunately, and my memory's slipping me. No, it was a fantastic series to win it both years. The first year with the Chevron B34s, we had Keke and another guy,
Micheal Clarke.
Sorry?
Yeah, Micheal Clarke.
Yeah, he was a very good tennis player, apparently, Davis Cup, and I think he should have stuck with tennis, not in motorsport. But we went on to win the championship with Keke, ups and downs. Again, good old Fred. We had a shortage of engines, but Fred learned I could build engines as well. So I'll be in between weeks, instead of enjoying myself at Queenstown or somewhere, I'll be rebuilding a Cosworth BDA, putting one engine out of two engines, things like that. The Keke was fantastic. The rules were my toolbox would be on the pit lane, and as soon as he got out of the car, he'd go straight to the front left-hand corner and take out his packet of cigarettes. That was mandatory. He had to have his packet of fags there ready as soon as he got out of the car. He was unreal. So it actually then carried on the following year with the B39, the red cars, when that was, as David said, Bobby, Rahal and Keke, and we finished first and third from memory. But we won again with Keke, and we had a few dramas. I remember the rolling start at Teretonga. Keke was trying to be a bit clever, and we got. They didn't start the rolling start. He he interpreted the rules different to everyone else. So we eventually got running, but he got fined or we got fined. And again, I was off to Dunedin to my brother's, the Toyota workshop, to rebuild another engine before the final at Wigram. So no, fantastic memories, fantastic guy, worked hard and played hard. We had some great times off track as well.
David, you in the second year, the year that Rosberg had the B39, you had sort of a bit of a hybrid replacement car for your first one, the B34 39 car. You put it on pole at Manfield, so it was obviously pretty good. And to put the car on pole at a track like Manfield, when the competition is Larry Perkins, Keke Rosberg, Bobby Rahal, Danny Sullivan, so on, must have been a great feeling. But did you see anything in Keke at that stage that gave you any hint that I've just put a car on pole and there's a future world champion behind me?
Well, we probably didn't know that then, to be fair. He was the wild man. He was very, very fast. He taught us an incredible amount. We had a chicane at Pukekohe. I remember this, on the top of the hill there. And we were all going around, and Keke was about a second quicker first time the session had been done there. And someone said to me, "That guy's an idiot. He just goes straight over the chicanes." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, go and look at him." And so good old Kiwis, looking after their rims and their chassis, they would just go around the slopey bits and straighten the car and go for it. Not Keke, he just launched it. The car, if the car stood up to it, he would come out quicker. So we all had to follow suit, and that's pretty much the way it developed. He was a bit of a trendsetter. He was a European racer, and but as picking him to be a champion, I don't know about that. I remember saying to him before he left, you remember where you came from if you get there, and he has, he does, and he remembers what NZ was. I remember that pole was so funny because Keke had told me something the year during the time we were in the States, and about rolling starts. He said, "David, all these idiots, they just roll up to the line and floor the throttle." He said, "What you do is about 100 yards back from the start, you drop the clutch just the way that you would do a regular start and free rev it, clear it, and hit it so that when it goes, it launches." And he said, we were approaching the line, and KK apparently said to me afterwards, he says, "I remembered I told you about that trick, and bugger." And we great times, as Dick said, wonderful memories of those Euro guys coming down here. And racing was fun. Racing really was fun. But we all tried to win. Don't get me wrong.
What about you, Dick? Did you see anything? I mean, you very soon afterwards you were working with Niki Lauda. You subsequently worked with world champions in the making. Was there anything you saw, Dick, in that 2 years of running Rosberg here that made you think, well, this guy could be even a Grand Prix winner, let alone a world champion?
If you saw him in the evening with a glass of scotch in one hand and a fag in the other, you'd probably go no. But when you saw him on track with his speed, his reactions, and as David rightly said, he would take straight line chicanes. But the thing was, he wasn't paying to repair the car, where most Kiwis owned their own cars. So Keke didn't really care. We had to repair it, and poor old Fred had to pay for it. So the maintenance was very high with Keke's car, but it paid off at the end. But his pure talent, his enthusiasm, his aggression was, very, very good. But also, I'll never forget one of the meetings at Bay Park. It was on, from memory, New Year's Day, and we were in the hotel New Year's Eve, and I went to bed at 3 a.m. I said, "Keke, I'm only looking after your car, but I'm off to bed." And he's, "Oh, yeah, one more drink." Here he is on the dance floor, drink in his hand. And sure enough, morning warm-up, 11 o'clock, we had a misfire. And he normally was very good at telling us whether it was fuel or electric. But he looked at me and he said, I don't know what it is this time." So I wasn't surprised. But it actually cost us the race because we led, and then it died on us. So we found the problem later.
I've dragged out of my book shelves here the 1980-81 Auto Course Annual, edited by Morris Hamilton, one of the very best there is. And this is a part of his driver review for the season. And he says that Keke Rosberg, still playing tunes on his DFV, nevertheless turned in some typically aggressive drives. And with the concentrated effort of the Fittipaldi team behind him in 1981, the ebullient little Finn should provide results as well as entertainment. So that was at the end of 1980. 1981 actually didn't turn out to be that good for him with Fittipaldi because the team had financial problems.
That's right.
End of 82, he's world champion. I mean, it was really quite an extraordinary thing, bearing in mind when he was in New Zealand winning the championship, he was already pushing 30. I mean, these days, you probably wouldn't make the British Touring Car Championship if you're pushing 30. So it's a completely different scene, isn't it?
Yes, it is these days now. These young lads now in touring cars and in Formula One. And I think a lot of things that helps them is their ability on simulators, their young brains. They're used to using iPhones 24/7. Their brains seem to work different from the older days. We have the same issue now with our touring car guys. They want to look at data all the time, whereas when David and I were doing it, when I was looking after guys years ago, there was no data. Example, running Ayrton in F3, you'd have to rely on his feedback, but his feedback was incredible. But now you get young guys that want to look at the data before they tell you about the car. And we used to always try and train them to tell us what the car's doing right or wrong. So they actually learn themselves. So it's a different way of going racing now. But these days we can't live without the laptop computers and all the software, because you wouldn't be anywhere if you didn't have all that data.
Michael,
Before we get off the subject of Keke Rosberg, David, you of course had additional exposure to him because you went to Canada and raced the Tui for Alan McCall, and you had two of the craziest guys ever to be in competition with, Gilles Villeneuve really doing his thing out front, and Keke Rosberg. It must have been an extraordinary series to have been part of, and you were right there with them.
Yeah, it was. It was a fabulous series, that Labatt 77, and it was actually, I think, during the year that Joel went away and did a Formula One test and came back. So, I mean, he'd been promoted to higher honours by James Hunt because James had seen him there at a previous year at Atlantic. So that was a pretty tough year, I can tell you. And certainly when you were running with what ultimately has proven to be two of the fastest drivers of their era in Formula One, Jules and Keke, fantastic time. Just picking up on something Dick was saying there about the ancient versus the modern. One thing that people probably don't know, that Dick Bennetts is legendary for his debriefs, and he pretty much invented them. Everyone, it's a ritual now. People, talk about debrief where you sit down and you analyze the driver. But Dick, some of the drivers would affectionately say they were interrogated by him, and that's true, because what he would do, and I've watched him, he'd go in and pump them for their information at corner entry, mid-corner exit, all the stuff. And then he'd go back half an hour later and ask the same questions to see if they still gave the same answers. So he knew if they were telling lies or not. So Dick's interrogation is legendary, but it was followed by subsequent teams and team owners and engineers. And he set the standard for making sure you get that thing called feedback, where what is the car doing? What is the driver feeling from that car going into a car? Because that's all that Dick can, and people like that can do, is translate what they're being told into how to make the car go faster. And he was a pioneer in that skill.
Where did that come from, Dick? Were you establishing that, I'm sure, long before that Senna came along? Clearly he loved all of that as well, but was that something you were doing with Lauda, with the BMW M1?
No, not so much with the BMW Pro car, because we weren't allowed to change too much because of the regulations. They were pretty much a controlled car. You could do a bit of camber, a bit of tow. I think you had 2 sets of springs, that was it, and a rear spoiler. I probably really got into it in depth when we ran with Jonathan Palmer in 81. Jonathan, very intelligently, had a doctor, trainee doctor at the time. He'd work 80 hours a week at a hospital, then come along and we'd start testing. And we struck up a very good rapport on working on understanding how the car worked. I knew the car from the previous year when I worked for Ron Dennis Project 4 with Stefan Johansson. And we switched from a March to a Ralph. So because I knew the car, I could understand then what Jonathan would say, and then we would bounce off each other. What about this? What about that? And that's probably also then when we started doing the track maps to have a very accurate turn 1 TI MC EX, turn in mid-corner exit. And that's where we expanded that from year after year after year. We got to the point now we can have a debrief sheet, which sometimes is too much, because some of the touring car events now, or most of them, we only have an hour and a half between sessions. So we will have an agreement 10 minutes after the session finishes. We sit down in the engineer's office, we run through quickly, but we don't have time then. But another example is moving on from the original plan. Colin Turkington is unbelievable in the depth. He writes his own reports now and then emails them through to his engineer and myself. So things have moved on, and drivers like Colin have picked up on that. And it's really good to see, because you've got that information to go back and look at again when you go back to that track again. So it's evolved over the years with the help of laptops now. But as David said, the early days it was sitting face to face and getting that information and understanding it and making it work for you.
Well, we're almost at the end of the 70s and we're almost at the end of our half hour, but we can't let it finish, Dick, because I'm looking at that BMW badge on your shirt. We were talking about BMWs before with the Redmond chevron you had in New Zealand, and we have just touched on the Pro Car series. You ran Niki Lauda one year in the first year, and you ran Hans Stuck in the second year, and there must be some great stories and memories you have of two very different characters.
Two very different characters, Michael, I have to say. This was when I was still working for Ron at Project 4, and we were tasked to building 22 or 24 pro cars. And then we'd finished them. We were absolutely knackered. There was 3 Kiwis, 4 of us building these cars. And Kev Weston was one of my really good friends. So and Ron said, just one more, Dick. I said, oh, look, we're knackered. We were churning them out so fast. And he said, you'll be really interested to know who will drive it. I said, look, we've had enough. We don't want to do it. But he twisted our arm, so we built one more. And another little side tale to that one was, he said, you have to be at Silverstone at 9 o'clock in the morning, and this driver will be there. We still didn't know who it was. So finished the car at 3:30 in the morning, went to load it into a little transporter, put the tail lift up, and halfway up the tail lift hydraulics burst. So I had much pleasure in calling Ron at 3:45 in the morning, saying, Ron, remember that discussion about the tail lift and the truck's not strong enough? It was only good for an F3. And he said, you got to be at Silverstone at 9. Put the phone down. So we got the car to Silverstone. We worked an all-nighter, home for a shower, off up to Silverstone, and in comes a helicopter, and out hops Niki Lauda. And Ron says, now do you think it's worth it? Of course, the end of the year, we won the championship. It was a fantastic year. But Stuckey the following year, we only did half a season. They ran out of sponsorship. But as you said, total different characters. But we won Monaco support race both years. Both of them finished with no wheel arches on the car, but total different characters to deal with. Stuckey was a great fun guy off track. Niki was a bit more serious, but on track they were both obviously, we know from their results, very talented.
Well, I think our time, Adam, is pretty close to it. David, you and Dick.
Just looking online, people still seem to be watching and happy. So I think, I'm happy to go for another 10 minutes if everyone else is. What do you think?
Well, look, there is a story which I would just think would be quite nice to wrap things up on then if we've got that extra leeway. Because Dick comes back into David's motor racing life, back to New Zealand with the Rolt RT4. So David, I think over to you. You can tell that story.
Oh, I'm trying to think which one. More importantly, I guess one that had happened was my sponsor at the time, Doug Condon from Prix, had said, David, I'm sick of our cars finishing third and fourth and fifth. We want to win. How are we going to win? We've got to get one of those RT1 things. So, of course, Steve Millen and Dave McMillan were pretty supreme in those cars at the time. So I went over to England with a shopping basket, and I said to Dick, are we going to get one of these RT1 things? And he said, no, we're going to look at an RT4. That's the way to go. And I said, oh, I don't know. He said, Rob Wilson's got one, and it's a Formula 3 car, and it's really doing well. And I said, oh, gosh, it's another oddball thing. I've always had oddballs. I'm not sure about it. He said, just let's do it. And so we got a car through Fred Oper in the States and got it to New Zealand, and it was really good first year. Dick had some magic. He's always looking for 2/10. It doesn't matter what category you're in. Dick always looking for 2/10. And usually in a good category, 2/10 is the difference between winning and losing. And in a good category, and an equally fought one. And that was us. And I think Dick remembers the story. He wanted to get more air into the engine, and I grafted some horrible thing out of fiberglass and got it off into the air. It got this huge, ugly airbox on the side of the car. But he straightened me out about something the other day. He said that our one worked and Steve Millen's didn't. What was that one about, Dick? I'd kind of forgotten that story.
Yeah, I remember it well. It's the RT4. The RT3 had one water radiator on the left side and an oil tank on the right. The RT4 had a water radiator each side. The RT1 had a water radiator at the front of the nose. So when we were actually testing at Prix, and it was quite a warm day, and I was leaning over the cockpit talking to David, and all this hot air was coming into my face, and I realised that's not good. It's going straight. The original RT4, Ron Taranak's car, had the airbox horizontal just above the side pod. So I figured the hot air was coming straight out the radiator into the side pod. So as David said, we went back to the factory, to the Oxton Motors. He had an old airbox there off one of the cars, I think Chevron or whatever, March or whatever. And we toiled around, grafted it, some aluminium rivets, some fiberglass, went back out to Pukekohe, back-to-back testing. Every time we did it, it was a 1/10.5 quicker with the new airbox tipped up in the air. Of course, then Steve Millen was up on the bank timing us, and we didn't know that at the time. So when he realised that, oh, this is much better up in the air, he made one for his RT1. But it didn't go any quicker, and he kept pestering us every race weekend. How come your car goes quicker with the airbox up there and mine doesn't? I said, Steve, we'll tell you at the end of the series. So the party at the end of the series, Steve, come on, if and well, tell me now what the trick was. I said, think, Steve, you're quite a bright lad. Think about it. He still couldn't work it out. I said, where's your radiator? He said, at the front. I said, where's ours? He said, at the side. I said, well, is your answer. Really? So he carried this thing all that series for no advantage whatsoever, because he didn't understand at the time what our thinking was. So Ron Taranak then heard about it and phoned me while we're still in NZ. What are you doing changing my airbox? I said, Ron, trust me, I found some performance for nothing for you. So he modified his tooling then, and every RT4 sold had an Oxo Motors special DB airbox on it. Yeah, great story.
You can see, Michael, how I had an advantage, like an unfair advantage, having Dick Bennetts in my camp. I mean, let's face it, it's that attention to detail which is the difference between winning and losing. You know, it can be anyway.
No, I think it also takes a good driver with, and David's got a very good engineer in mind. So the feedback again, we had a very good rapport, and that then helps to, because that car was brand new to me. We'd run the RT3, but the RT4, we actually finished up at Wigram with no front wing on the car.
I remember
It
that.
had so much downforce from the side pods, we could trim the rear wing and eventually brave enough to take the front wing off completely.
Yeah. Yeah, one of those pictures that you've got there, Adam has got that picture of that car on the grid. That picture there is going through the hairpin at Pukekohe has got the high airbox on, and the Wigram shots have got the no wing. So we had the rear wing with no flap on the back, with no plane, and so it was flat and nothing on the front at all. It was like, why are you running an RT4? Because it's got no downforce. But Wigram was all about flat out fast corners, and you really, really, really needed that speed, didn't you, Dick?
Well, clearly, David, it was also, not only was he a great engineer and a great mate, but he was also a great tipper, because he tipped you into getting an RT4 when you went over to England to buy an RT1. So you were looking at old technology, and your mate put you in the direction of new technology. And
the bugger's still doing it. I mean, he's been winning races in every decade since the 60s. I mean, how good is that? I mean, I don't know how he does it, but here we are locked up and locked down and everything and doing nothing. And there's this bugger's trying to win his 5th touring car championship to add to his 5 Formula 3s. I mean, good on you, mate.
Yeah, but it takes, I've always said with interviews, it's not me, it's a team, and it's the training of the team and the passion to win. It's having a good key bunch of people around you, and that's what I always maintain. It's not just me. My name might be above the door, but it's a good bunch of people, crew working together, engineers, mechanics, right from the logistics of moving everything around, from the office girls. It's it's a team effort, so it's not just me.
Well, guys, we've got more of these interviews planned. We've got Robbie Francevic, I think, next week. We've got Graham Lawrence coming up soon after that. But I don't think there's any doubt at all that, Dick, we need to get you back, because we've only just got to, 1981, and we've got all of the British Formula 3 Championship wins. We've got Senna, we've got Mika Häkkinen, and we've got British Touring Car Championship. So we need to do this again. And
I would love to.
That's wonderful. That's great to hear. And David, you must just look upon what your mate's doing, and you were there while he was winning his most recent championship last year. For you, it must just give you so much pride to think that young guy from Dunedin that you took to England with you in 1972 turned out pretty good.
We must have had a premonition. When I say we, my mate John Goodwin, who is the #1 supporter in New Zealand of West Surrey Racing, after Norman Bennetts, of course, Dick's brother. But John Goodwin and I tortured over whether we should go and see these last 2 races of the BTCC last year. And we worked out a bit of a calendar to say, we've got to go to Silverstone, we've got to go to the Brands. And what a fortuitous thing that was, because Dick's brand new cars finished up 1st and 3rd in the championship. And, wonderful. Sorry, 1st and 2nd. What am I talking? 1st and 2nd. But in the fullness of time, he took a car which was brand new, built it from scratch in less than 3 months, put it on the track, won first race meeting, and importantly, won the last race of the year and won the championship, as he said, got 2nd. So it was arguably probably one of his best, West Surrey's best years ever. And I was so glad to be there. And John and I shared in the euphoria that was in that team on that finishing lap. It was unbelievable.
Well, that's absolutely wonderful. Before we pass back to Adam, Dick, final word to you. I see today that the Canadian Grand Prix has been cancelled. So at best, Formula One this year will start with the French Grand Prix. I think that's at the end of June or maybe early July. I know no one's got a crystal ball. And so despite all of your engineering expertise of winning championships, your crystal ball's no better than anyone else's. But do you have any indication as to whether, in fact, the championship will even happen this year with the British touring cars?
Yes, well, the man who runs it, Alan Gow, he's an Aussie. He's one of the good Aussies. But he is determined, and we're in dialogue every week. Alan sends round to the team owners what's occurring. At the earliest, we'll be late July. That's very clear now. But he's still hoping to have 10 meetings. We may go into November. That doesn't bother us. The daylight saving, we've all got headlights on the cars. Everyone's been asking for night races, so we might have it come upon us. We also may have back-to-back races to do, but that doesn't bother us. Everyone's in agreement. And if we can get 10 meetings, then it'll still be fantastic. ITV are still behind doing it. There has been one or two discussions. We may have to do the first couple of meetings with no spectators. So that's been possibly planned as well. So Alan's working really hard with the circuit owners. Jonathan Palmer owns quite a few of the tracks. So MSV, they're doing a great job. And hopefully, as David said earlier, we're all in lockdown, but my engineering mind's still doing some homework with the engineers. We're using the Zoom connection, doing our engineer chats. But yeah, hopefully that we will be up and running. But as you said, Michael, it's a crystal ball, which hopefully, I think it's the same problem in New Zealand as here. Some people do not really follow the government rulings, and it's so frustrating that people are bending the rules, breaking the rules, and that will delay everyone. So all I can say is people, just follow the rules and we'll all be out of this earlier.
Good point, Dick.
Yeah, excellent advice, excellent comments. Thank you, Dick Bennetts. Thank you, David Oxton. Adam, back to you.
Thanks, guys. And amazing. People have been online saying they've really enjoyed the stories, and they've stuck with us for the entire 55 minutes. I think we will have to go back and do another one of these with you, Dick, because we didn't cover any British touring cars, and it's obviously one of the best series in the world. We love watching it down here in New Zealand, so hopefully we can come back and do a 1 hour special just with you on touring cars at some stage. As Michael said, we're going to do a whole lot more of these, hopefully. So remember to like the Legends Club page and the Fast Files page to be able to see these. And thanks so much, guys, for doing this, and thanks, Michael, for doing the interviewing, which has been brilliant, because having someone that has all this knowledge of all the eras is just great. It's been awesome for me sitting back here and watching.
I'm just talking to my mates, Adam. It's simple.
Adam,
all right. Well, basically, Adam, yes.
Can I put a plug in for our lovely Debbie Day? She's the firewoman that put this whole concept together. She's our Jacinda of motorsport. She literally is going to shake the men of motorsport by the ears and make them jump into line in the future. And I look forward to it. And thank you, Debbie, for all you do with your motor racing club, with all the Orange Army, with your volunteers, with your support directly of motorsport competitors. You're fantastic. And thanks for putting this together and getting Dick and I the chance to talk to you all.
Thanks, David.
Great words, David. Here.
Yeah, I agree.
All right,
All right, have a good day,
that's a wrap. And we just got a little outro to play. And remember, just like and subscribe to our pages. You'll be able to see this on Motorsport New Zealand, the Fast Files, and of course the Legends Club page. So just keep looking out for us, and we'll be back again real soon.